to pose a question. What makes someone a Christian? What is Christianity when it's outside the church? Is it its own sort of religion? Or is it something else? Whilst Christianity is defined as the followers of Jesus Christ, that in and of itself only covers the general idea. And even then, given the interpretations, it can be a pretty broad church. Could a Christian be a nationalist? Could a Christian nation exist? It's only a possible one, but given the general closed-mindedness of nationalists, it is a debatable thing. Jesus was a very open person. He invited multiple people from multiple different sects of Judaism into his fold, including Gentiles and Zealots. All of whom were problems for not only the Jewish community, but also the Romans. Someone did ask me in a comment, do I live more like a Roman or like a Jew? That sadly is a rather narrow window of options, because we're not split into Jews and Romans, but into multiple different cultures, and many of them affect us. In fact, in my case, I believe I live more like a Celt. He was trying to catch me out, trying to say that because I was Christian, my culture was more indicative of Rome, and therefore I wouldn't blame the Jews for crucifying Jesus. But that's by the by. I've already done a video on that. But if we say that anything influenced by Rome is therefore Christian, we instantly hit a block when it comes to a large part of English history after the 1500s, thanks to King Henry VIII. Yes, the Church of England is remarkably close to the Catholic Church, merely taking a slightly different stance based on theology. It is nowhere near as radically different as the Lutheran Church, and certainly hasn't gone into different aspects of theology like the later Baptist and Jehovah's Witnesses. All of these have their own ideas of what Christianity is and what it means to be Christian. So we start reaching a point where Christianity evolves from a religion into a potential philosophy. Certainly a different way of looking at things, but depending on how one's culture interprets phenomena, be it personifying them or giving them agency, that can be a different thing entirely. I've said it before. Greek creation story with Nyx, chaos, Tartarus, etc., coming out of nowhere and being personifications of the night, the darkness, the changing seasons and so forth. That is very much Greece putting personifications on them, anthropomorphizing them, if you will. Even the primeval gods. The moment you look at it from that perspective, you can see the scientific model of the universe's creation is merely a cold, unthinking look at how the universe came about. It wasn't trying to personalise it, wasn't trying to anthropomorphise it, wasn't trying to personify it. It was literally just taking the facts. But that makes it harder to make a story out of, and that's how things were told back in the day, making stories. Considering that Genesis chapter 1 managed to fit it all in one chapter, simply splitting it over 7 days apparently, made it somewhat easier to absorb from an academic point of view. When you consider perspective, that makes a difference. So is Christianity a perspective on life? A perspective on how the world runs? One could say that is religion in general. Again, focusing on gods, deities, spirits, whatever you want to call them. But then in a way, that makes science a sort of philosophy, doesn't it? It's a way of looking at the universe. Go on to that is broken down to certain mindsets such as empiricism, and that does not have an answer to God, because God is not in any way measurable empirically. But like many things, that makes a difference, because art, swordsmanship, and other things, they cannot be measured empirically, and therefore they have no standard on which we can balance, on which we can measure, qualitative or quantitative. But what about lifestyle? Since in religion, following one's own lifestyle does help, or does become a requirement to entering heaven. I would say that is a good one. How we live our lives. Going to church, giving to charity, praying to God, helping people. In that case, isn't it just a mindset, a position on life? One could say so. It's worthwhile noting that Christian mindsets do not necessarily remove science from the plate. Far from it. Since there are many scientists who do in fact believe in God. Does that necessarily prove God's existence? No. But then again, that is not the point. The point is, quite simply, that science was never meant to disprove God, and scientists can hold a belief in God. The two are far from mutually exclusive, and in fact have overlapped since the beginning of science. Just a quick note, it is the exact same when it comes to evolution and survival of the fittest. You can believe in the process of that, you can believe everything regarding that, and yet not have that affect your day-to-day life, because you do not practice it, as in, if someone is clearly not fit enough, not intelligent enough, not adaptable enough, they will die, and I will help them. No. You will naturally help people. Hopefully you would anyway. So could Christianity be an attitude? Again, that is a possibility, since one way we can look at being a Christian is being Christ-like to all. And in fact, several of the passages in the Bible do call us to be Christ-like. Jesus tells his disciples, I command you to love one another, as I have loved you, and thus shall you be known as my disciples. That is very much paraphrasing, but it does sum it up. Certain passages also emphasise a polite way of interacting with the world. Knock, and the door will be opened. Seek, and ye shall find. Ask, and it shall be given. It's literally telling us to make an action, and something will follow. Cause and effect. You need to ask someone, and then they'll give it to you. You need to look for something, and you will find it. You need to knock on the door for anyone to know that you're on the other side. So it's asking us to be proactive. It's asking us to make movements. And that's sort of how prayer works as well. Or marshalling your thoughts so people can understand. God may well understand himself, but he wants you to understand what it is you're asking for. And also, be willing to ask. To say Christianity is one thing over another is narrowing it down purely for the sake of isolation, as far as I can tell. I suppose it's like looking at farming. These days, we just see a farm as a source of food. We see it as a place. But a farm is also a way of life. It is an inheritance. It is an investment as well. It is very much a lifestyle. You don't get days off when farming. So being a farmer isn't just a job. It's very much who you are. You stand out in the community. And it's the exact same thing with being a Christian. Not to shout it out. Far from it. Because otherwise you can easily be seen as someone just being a hypocrite, shouting out prayers on street corners, when really you should be focusing more on doing things. Granted, people might say, then how will we know that they're Christian? When you happen to walk into them going to church. When you happen to hear them quoting a Bible verse. But here's the thing, you spent enough time with them at that point to know they're a good person, to know who they are, and what they think. I think the safest way to sum this up is to say that to be a Christian is not just to be a follower of Christ at church, not just say prayers, but to hold many, many things on a tight leash. Having an attitude appropriate to Christianity, having a mindset appropriate to Christianity, having a lifestyle appropriate to Christianity. And the beautiful thing is, you can easily be sitting next to someone who goes through all that on a day-to-day basis and never know anything about it, precisely because they are doing that. So keep that in mind, my friends. Stay humble, stay safe, and God be with you.